But I think it's about just managing those check-ins. And am I tired? If you're getting sick, are you going to wake up and you're going to do your routine because that's what you do? And you're not going to honor, like, my body's actually asking for me to slow down and rest a little bit right now. So I think the biggest thing there is to just interrupt that pattern with checking in with the body.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And, we got a good fresh coat of snow last night. Kristin, our guest, and I were just talking about that. But you know what the big problem is going to be? I don't know if you remember or not, Camden, but with all this snow, guess where the Christmas lights are going to be till probably like April.
Ooh, yep, they're going to get frozen in because then big piles of snow, they like to melt, and then all that water goes down to the bottom, right where all the Christmas lights are, and they are stuck till May. Yeah.
Yep. And you know how many sets of Christmas lights I've ruined over the years thinking, oh, it's loose enough.
You just yank it. Yeah, they're not built for that.
Let's just say they don't spend a whole lot of money on the connectors for Christmas lights. And speaking of Christmas lights, Kristin, I'm just curious. Now I can't think of. I think it's a Coke commercial where they light up a palm tree for Christmas. Do y'all do that in Florida?
Oh, there are definitely palm trees lit here for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got lights on a cactus out front, Dad.
Well, yep. I guess you know what that makes sense. But it's funny because you never see Santa Claus in shorts. So
no, that's part of the magic, I guess. He's always cold.
Yeah. he rides the cold.
I've seen the surfer Santas. You've never seen those?
No,
what?
I have
Surfer
not.
Santa.
No, I've definitely seen a Santa dressed like a surfer.
Oh, that sounds like a cool T-shirt. That's what I'm thinking is a surfer Santa riding the wave.
Yeah, with his Hawaiian gear on.
Yeah. Ooh, Santa Claus Hawaiian shirt. Now I'm warming up already.
All right.
So lest I continue to babble and drift away like I can do sometimes, I want to bring us back to who you are and what you do. So I'd love for you to share, and I don't normally ask this question, but I saw it on your website, so I got to throw it at you. Your purpose and how did you find your purpose when you shifted?
Well, it started by being this seeker, like this relentless seeker when I was in corporate, always looking for where I belonged and what my path was. And just hitting wall after wall, right? I'd be excited about things and then I would hit a wall just over and over again until I thought that something was wrong with me. And I saw this TED Talk came across my email one day by Emily Wapnick, and it's called Why Some of Us Don't Have Just One True Calling. And she talked about this pattern, and I finally felt like I wasn't alone in the world. And she calls us multi-potentialites, and I'll let you look up the talk if you want to watch it. But that's really what got me noticing that there wasn't I could keep going on this path to discover. And honestly, in corporate, it was a lot of what path do you want to be on? Choose the path and we'll help you be there. But for me, it was more about unraveling, just unattaching from all the systems and the structures and the paths and all of that to really find me. And it wasn't until I did that and through meditation, really, that I found me and discovered what I wanted. And it wasn't corporate world, that's for sure. But it was more of an internal search than it was external. And I think that's for those of us that like to learn, the seekers. I was reading all the books and taking all the tests and all the things, but I wasn't finding my true fulfillment. Sometimes that's all putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound until you really just unravel what's within, you know?
So
I'm curious.
before you go, let's round it out. What is your purpose?
My purpose is really to help people discover their purpose, right? To unravel from everything that they've attached to, that they've been conditioned into, to reveal that light within them and then give them the courage to express that in the world. Because it does take courage.
I was going to say, I like the term seeker there. I really hadn't thought of it too much because as you're talking, what comes to mind more is the term I would use would probably be like a disruptor a little bit of. It's like following this path, like, hey, I like these ideas over here, but this doesn't quite make sense. I want to change the system, change the way people do things, looking for those ways to change things. One of the things that I think is interesting about that idea of like being a disruptor is this disruption for the sake of disruption versus the purpose-driven disruption. And I see you nodding there, so you know where I'm going with it. Go ahead. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's such a huge distinction for people. Not just going, everything sucks. This is stupid. I don't want this. It's like, no, but I'm going to build something that is better. There's a huge difference there.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing to me about that is that really it's only disrupting because so much of the world is still, like what I say, stuck in the matrix. They're still walking the path that a lot of other people are walking, or that they think they're supposed to be walking, and all of that. So it is a disruption to step out of the norm, right? And I hope that it becomes more of the norm, but it does take disruption to get there.
How do you help folks find that? Because it's there's not a whole lot of us out there who are able to fulfill their purpose, and that fulfillment is part of what's putting money in the bank account. So the folks that are putting tab A into slot B along the line. How do you help somebody like that that's part of their life?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think that everybody's meant to go on that path in this life. So really it's the ones who are the seekers, the ones that are listening to this show and are lit up and thinking, I've been feeling this nudge inside of me and I want to go on that journey. It's those people. Not everybody will go on that path or choose to go on that path or feel inspired to, right? They're the ones that are working to bring the paycheck home and live their life how they want to live their life. And for me, it just was beyond that. I had to find my purpose first, and the paycheck and all of that was, I mean, while it was nice, it was secondary. It became secondary for me. My fulfillment was really what I was chasing. So I think it just depends on the person. And then once they have that, I always encourage people, when you feel that thing light up inside of you, when you're listening to me or Otis or Cam speak, then it's really about following that urge and finding what's at the end of that. But it's really more about the unraveling than it is the, let me give you a book to read or a podcast to listen to. It's more of the, how can we get quieter inside so that we can hear our own voices and discover that.
Could you talk some about how action plays into that? Because I know for our coaching, that's a really big piece of, taking that first step towards what you think your purpose might be. And by pursuing that, you can find that feeling gets a little bit more clear as you keep working towards it. Could you talk some about that?
Yeah, it's really about that building trust, right? I call it the trust cycle. So it's, getting I know I'm meant to go this way, but it doesn't look and feel entirely like I'd want it to, or it's a little bit scary, but I'm going to take the step anyways and see what comes out, right? And it's just taking that data in and then moving forward again. And the more you do that, the more truth you find, right? The more you unravel and detach from the things that aren't really yours. And I speak a lot to this when I talk about intuition and ego. When I'm speaking to people about how to evolve their intuition, it's people will say, I don't know if it's my ego or if it's my intuition. And I always say, listen to the message, follow it. And if there's ego there, it's gonna flush itself out anyways, right? And then the only way you can do that though is if you take action. But everybody waits until they know it's 100% my intuition, and then I'm going to take the action. But similar to what you were saying, right? If they wait till, for example, that they don't have any fear, then when are they going to ever take the action?
Yeah, and that's I deal with folks all the time, and it's interesting because they also develop this fear of, well, what if that's not it? Mm-hmm. What if this isn't it? And I'm like, because it's the same thing, they want 100% assurance that this is the path, when in reality, in life is the path, and you can choose to be initiative with your life, or you can choose to sit back and, follow a pattern that somebody else has set. How much sleep did you lose when you stepped away from corporate?
None.
Awesome. Awesome. Did you hear that, folks?
I did, it was a relief. I was in that space where I was working and hustling so hard, I didn't understand that I was burnout until I had more time to actually see that. And so the rest was needed, actually. But the real unraveling was, who am I without being corporate Kristin? And then it just became, I did a lot of meditation and self-discovery. I went on a lot of walks. I let myself flow instead of having structure in the day. I swing way far into my feminine energy, only to realize I don't get anything done in that space, and I have to come back to the masculine at some point. So, but yeah, it was a journey. But sleep, no, it was definitely the right move for me.
I'd love if you could talk some more on burnout. One of the things that comes to mind, I think this is a kind of a next level of this conversation. Because I think for a lot of people, we look at burnout and kind of that corporate world, and then it's like, well, then I understand my purpose, and purpose gives you energy, gives you that fulfillment, and that's all very true. But you can have call it like a purposeful burnout, where it's like, look, I am all in on my purpose, but I am still not taking care of myself. I'm still not balanced in any way, and I'm getting that same kind of burnout. Could you talk some about finding that balance? Because when you're, my favorite example is like when you're feeding the kids, when you're saving the world, when you're doing all this, it's really easy to sacrifice all of those kind of things. So how do you help folks to find that level where they don't fall into that? Yeah, I like that term, purposeful burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trap of the hustle. I used to call it. I was so afraid of being corporate Kristin again that I went so feminine. To me, it's really about checking in. It's about creating your own systems that work for you, right? Whether that's daily rituals or nightly rituals, or it's getting up, going for a walk in the morning, whether it's contemplation over your coffee in the morning, whatever that looks like. And then having those check-ins regularly. So for me, I check in every time I host an event, when I'm doing podcast interviews, when I'm with a client in session. I'm always checking in to see, how does this feel for me? Right? I'm not just lost in the doing of the thing and then, okay, what do I need to do next? But I'm checking in with, how does it feel to me? So I'm always looking for that alignment. And then also I do that monthly. So I have a monthly check-in that I do where I'm looking at, like, how does anything come to a completion in my business? Is there anything that I want to move on and build next? Is there a workshop that wants to come out of me right now? Like, what am I inspired to do and build next? And so for me, it's really about coming into those regular alignment check-ins. It's not easy because you can really get lost in the hustle. You can really, we live in a doing world, but we're human beings, not human doings. So we lose the being, and it's really just about remembering that that's still there. And how does this feel to me? How is my energy in this moment?
Could you talk some about maybe like a framework for that? Because I think that's an area where a lot of people talk about reflections, daily reflections, these kind of things, gratitude exercise. And a lot of the times there's a little bit of a gap. It's like, okay, hey, literally sit down, got my notebook here. All right, what questions am I writing down? What am I asking myself? Could you talk through a little bit about what you do for that maybe? And, I think that's a good starting off point for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Well, when I started, it's funny you asked this, because I talk to a lot of people about this, because a lot of my work is in the intuitive world. So I speak a lot about bridging from logic to intuition, right? And so when I started my daily self-care rituals, I literally wrote a list what are all the things I can do for my mind? What are the things I can do for my body? What are the things I can do for my spirit? I wrote them down. Mm-hmm. And I decided I'm going to get up and I'm going to pick one from the list, like from each section of the list, right? And it became things like I'm going to make my bed. And when I start tidying up my environment, then my environment feels good to me. And I want my environment to feel really clean. And I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to sit down and meditate. I'm going to do a little breath work. I'm going to do some yoga. Like I just picked what was in resonance with me. Mm-hmm. Now that's shifted into, I do energy work. I meditate every morning and I ground and protect my energy. That's my standard routine. And then sometimes I feel inspired. I want to go for a walk today, or I want to lift weights this morning, or, whatever it is that I feel like doing. But it's inspired to be more intuitive for me, and it evolves more intuitively. But in the beginning, it was very much like, here's all the things I can do for my body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, I love that, because I think, and I want to get into this a bit more about the routine thing, because I think it's so important. But this dichotomy of intuition in your routine, I find really interesting. I mean, in the literal sense, because, no, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm doing, back and buys, and, Tuesday, Thursday, it's leg day, whatever, those sort of things. There's no intuition allowed in that kind of a routine. So I'd love to just kind of unpack that, especially since 15 years in corporate, you have to have systems, processes, and a scheduled routine in there. You don't get to be intuitive in that world. Part of the reason you're not in that world. So talk to us a little bit about this, the mind, body, health, that list that you started from, and now how you can be more intuitive, or what I hear is flexible in that.
Yeah. So, for example, with your workout routine, I mean, I would be checking, and the first thing that came to mind when you said that was, like, how does your body feel? Does your body need rest? Because we can get in that structured routine, right? This is why we can drive places without realizing, like, oh, how did I get here? Like, I mean, I know I got here, but like, I just did it so mindlessly. It's just ingrained in my body. To me, that's what the work is. That unraveling is really about that opening up and creating space between that routine and what we've always done, to really start to question, is this actually what I want to do? Does my body feel good doing this? I did CrossFit for a year. And when my membership was up, I checked in with my body. My body literally wanted to do yoga for a year. Like, I was like, I am not going to be doing CrossFit again, because it beats your body like a lot. So, I mean, the first thing I would say there is really checking in to see, how does my body feel? Are you stretching enough? A lot of people don't stretch when they lift. So stretching is like an easy way to even start tuning into that. And I've started sometimes in my nightly routine, I'll add a stretch in, because it's a nice way to wind down. And I don't get enough stretching in either when I'm lifting. So, but I think it's about just managing those check-ins. And am I tired? If you're getting sick, are you going to wake up and you're going to do your routine because that's what you do? And you're not going to honor, like, my body's actually asking for me to slow down and rest a little bit right now. So I think the biggest thing there is to just interrupt that pattern with checking in with the body.
I think there's a really interesting thing there, that there's almost like, I'm going to compare it to like the therapy speak nowadays, where it's like, as people have become more aware around mental health, there's also this faction of people who may understand some of the terminology and they're using it necessarily in like an unhealthy way. Like, hey, like, I'm just setting boundaries. It's like, well, no, you cut away everyone in your family without saying anything. You didn't actually really have a conversation. There wasn't necessarily like a real depth to it. It was just, you're like, oh, I'm setting boundaries. I'm healthy. I think there's a similar thing when you talk about the intuition there. Like, what comes to mind is and I'm blanking on who says it, but I know there's the Stoic phrase around, the most dangerous thing is to lie to yourself, and it's also the easiest thing to do. When you talk about intuition and working out, I can tell you, as somebody with my back pain and my experience with that, there's times where I could convince myself that I do not need to work out, but there is a push that needs to happen there. Could you talk some about that, like self-rationalization versus the intuition and kind of that push and pull?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the first thing that I always tell people is that you can't access intuition from a space of emotion. It's not intuition at that point. So when you talk about, or even like being in the mind, so your example there speaks to more of a mind overruling, and the mind, it's more of a mindset thing, right? I can sort of talk myself out of it and convince myself that it's not good for me. What I feel there is the disconnect between the mind and body then. So, and that's the same thing with, like I mentioned, emotion. When the body's in an emotional reactive state, you can't actually tune into the body because now you're in that sort of survival reactionary state. It's different than when you're calm and you can actually tune into your body. So I would argue that even if your mind says something, so a lot of intuition is really about learning to feel the body and allow the mind to interpret. So when I started in my journey with intuition, I, like I said, rejected corporate Kristin, masculine Kristin a lot. And it wasn't until I was doing a reading for somebody once, and I haven't been intuitive consciously my whole life, but I was starting to do a reading for someone, and I noticed my mind interpreting the energy that was coming through. That is what gave me permission to trust and believe in the mind and to start utilizing it in a different way, right? So instead of being mind first, body, maybe it's body first, then mind, right? It's about building a different relationship with how the mind interprets, even with meditation, right? When you sit down and meditate, your mind starts to wander. I always say to people, congratulations, you have a mind. Like that's what it's meant to do. Meditation is just bringing your attention back and letting the mind know you're not in charge here. Like we're actually doing this thing right now for resting and relaxation. We're not thinking right now. But you have to actively train the mind in that way. And so I think it's just about building awareness that the body might have something to say too, than the mind, like, and really discerning the truth behind that, because the mind is going to be in its patterns and what it believes to be true. But if you really detach from that and allow yourself to live from an intuitive space, you can expand way further than the mind allows you to think, because the mind is in its own patterns and its own survival-based thinking. So yeah, did that help?
Yeah, and I want to take that a step further. So to take my example, my pain with my back. It's like my back is hurting, therefore I'm like, oh, I need to not have that pain, therefore I need to not work out. The assessment there, of course, is it's like, well, by working out and doing it in a smart way, you are actually pushing through, and that's going to help the pain in the long term, all that kind of stuff, right? I think physical ones, just like Dad, you're using your workout analogy earlier. Those are the easier ones to understand. Kristin, I want to hear one of the harder ones to understand, one of the more mental games where maybe some experience you've had with a client or a personal experience. That's another example of that. Because I think, the physical ones are a lot easier to wrap our heads around. The other ones are much more insidious and trickier.
Okay. So let's talk about money for a second.
Okay.
And people investing in themselves. And one time I had a conversation with someone who was thinking about working with me, and she was telling me that she was trying to guide and lead her business, and she was using her savings account. Her savings account was regularly depleting, right? But she felt very called to work with me, and she knew that something had to shift. And at one point we ended up having a conversation, and I said, listen, and I want to preface this with, when you're in money is so relative to people, and it's so triggering too, right? Like people will say, I don't have any money to spend on that. And they might have 50 grand in the bank, right? But their safety, like their minimum safety zone there is maybe 50K. And if they had 55K, they feel like they would have some room there, right? It's just so relative to people. So I just want to say, like, you have to trust your own survival instincts and what is the truth for you when it comes to money, right? So I'll just say that first. So what I said to her, because, I knew that the money was there, I said to her, I said, listen, I said, you can continue down the path that you've been going, making the same decisions and patterns that you've been instituting in your life over and over again and actually deplete your savings. Mm-hmm. Or you can choose to invest and shift your patterns, start to shift the way that you think about things, start to bring in money. And it was within a month, she made more money in her business than she had ever made in a month. And she already was starting to shift, right? And so then we start to collect that evidence around like, oh, the patterns can shift. But sometimes people, going back to our conversation earlier, like about action, sometimes people are so paralyzed in the fear that they don't take the action. They don't move because their mind says, this isn't good. This isn't what we're used to. This is out of the norm. This is a change. I'm afraid of this. We have to step into that level of disruption at some point to really shake up the mind. Because her body was saying, yes, I want to work with you, right? To go back to your intuition.
No, I have nothing to add there because I was like, that sums it up perfectly. We went very full circle on that. So go ahead, Dad.
Well, I was just want to stay in that line of thought a bit. And, how do you help them realize that it's an unfounded fear that's holding them back?
Fear is such an interesting thing, right? Even the talk about the self-care you were asking about, Otis, like fear, we live in a world right now where fear is super amplified, right? So self-care to me becomes a non-negotiable. I'm going to put that out there for a second. So we know we live in a world where fear is amplified. So it's more crucial than ever for us to be grounded in our own energy and understand what is true for us and how we want to move forward, not get lost in the fear of everyone around us. So for me, I just realized I always do the thing I'm afraid of. So I have these temper tantrums and like, I'm afraid I'm not going to do this. I'm holding myself back and I'm, all the things until I sit down and it sits there and it just keeps nudging me over and over again. And then eventually I sit down, I face the fear and I just ask for truth. It's one of the biggest tools that I use. Is just write, what are all the things I'm afraid of? What's everything coming up? It doesn't matter. Like I write them all down and then I meet each one and I ask intuitively, what is the truth? And I let that resonance sit within and anchor into my body. I realized that I always do the thing that I'm afraid of. And so it became a question of how long am I going to suffer in the fear before I do the thing anyways? And so many people just sit in the fear, right? We choose our suffering. If you've ever read that, the book Loving What Is by Byron Katie, it's about exactly that. It's about when we question things, even when we fight against like the things that are happening in our government and, whatever, that we're choosing to not accept what is. So we create our own suffering from that space, right? And fear isn't something that we don't become fearless. We just walk differently with fear. We learn to walk with it. We learn to face it and say, yeah, okay, I see you. And I know that you're here because we're doing something different and I'm going to do it anyways. And most people, if they really sat and thought about it, they would know like, am I running from the lion or, am I just afraid of making a change? Afraid of what that might look like on the other side, how other people might see it or whatever the fear is.
Talking about, I wrote this down specifically, not to like challenge you as a quote or anything like that, but you said this of not getting lost in the fear of everyone around us. Talking there, especially like, using the political example without going down that rabbit hole and, all those things. There's so much around us all the time in society. There's so much fear with people we love that we still want to be around. We're not trying, going back to my example earlier, it's like not like we just want to cut people off because they don't understand it or those kind of things there. Could you talk some about living with that and those folks around you? Because I think there's a really interesting thing here to use a really broad, like superficial kind of superficial term for this, but of like enlightenment, right? Like we have meditated and get the purpose. Now I am enlightened. And now everyone else is still in the dark. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to stay over here. And I'm doing my own thing. And I don't want to participate in society. And I don't want to help the other. And there's this weird, like, kind of cutting off thing that can happen with that. Could you talk some about how to not cut folks off? Because I can tell that's not what you're about. And then also, but still not giving into that fear. Because you have to kind of walk in both worlds a little bit with that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I have been that one that separated and said, okay, I'm going to live in Kristin world over here. not engage in that. Right. It definitely, I would say that the biggest key there is the more anchored you are in who you are, the easier it is to be around that energy without it disrupting you. Most people walk around with, their energy field is open, right? So those people, then you can feel the fear of other people, or you walk into a room and you can feel the anger or whatever, and it starts to shift your energy. I always say that that's your aura has been penetrated. That's your energy has been penetrated in a way that you're allowing it to shift. And the way that we have real compassion for people who feel that energy is we witness them and their energy, but we withstand ours. We hold ours, because us shifting our energy or into theirs is not serving anyone. But that's the real strength. The real strength is being able to walk in that room of chaos and to be able to hold this beautiful, grounded, anchored energy where people will be magnetic to you because they can feel that, right? Because you're not getting lost in it. When we in that space and we get lost in it, it's just not of service to us or them, right? It's just amplifying that energy more. So I would say the biggest thing I would focus on there is really anchoring in and protecting and grounding your own energy so that you can be in those spaces. And the only way to find out is to take action, like you said, right? To go in those spaces and to discover, how am I reacting? How am I, am I feeling unsettled? Did I just get super anxious because I walked into this room? Like, how am I feeling? How am I reacting? And it's just a reflection for us to know this is the work that I still need to do. The only way we know that is if we allow ourselves to be in those spaces, right? So I would also say, like, if you're in that space of still trying to navigate that and manage that, some people are really hypersensitive, the people who are diagnosed autistic, for example, in the world, super hypersensitive. And they haven't, in my opinion, really been taught how to manage that energy, right? And so there is a period of time that I think is reasonable to take and learn how to do that for yourself, and then be in those rooms, because you being in that room is impactful. And I'll mention this lastly. Yes. I was in a course recently, a class that I took, and she said that when we are in a room or we choose not to be in a room, we've influenced that room. And I think that's the big message, right? It's like, the more that we go on our enlightened path and we choose to isolate ourselves, who are we helping there, right? So we have to choose where we want to be of influence.
100% agree. I was just going to just double up on that, because I know I had a client I worked with this summer, and she was in a leadership role, and the team was doing terrible and people not doing their job and all this kind of stuff. And she was like, I want to quit. I want to quit so bad. It's like, well, if you quit, then no one there is going to learn anything. It's all just going to continue to implode. It's like, you can step up and be the leader in that room. And you might not be able to change those folks, but all you can ever do is just model what that behavior should look like, model what that leadership looks like. And I 100% agree. If you choose not to be in that room, you're just leaving it. You're saying, hey, let that bad stuff keep going. I think that to round it out, I want to say one more thing on that. There's this balance. We talk about falling into the fear and those kind of things. I have this phrase I like to say with folks a lot of the time of, it's like, sometimes the only way to win the game is not to play. And it's like, when it comes into like all of the, the hate back and forth and people with all these judgments that don't really make sense, all these kind of things. It's the only way to win is not play the game, but it doesn't mean you can't talk to those people, because then you're just leaving them to just keep going back and forth forth with each other, and it's never actually going to solve anything. You still have to be able to model what that behavior should look like. And modeling is the only way to get anyone, or the only thing you can control as far as getting people to change their behavior, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, we talk about it all the time that like energy attracts. And once you become more self-aware that you are doing that, then yeah, you can control that. And it becomes that choice that you're making that, yeah, I don't want to be happy-go-lucky, jump up and down, or I don't want to be pissed off about a situation because I'm choosing that. And that's the power of having that self-awareness. I want to go back to something you mentioned early on with the feminine versus masculine energy, and in that sense of we joke about this every so often in the show. I can sit over here in this nice, comfortable chair, and I can manifest success, but manifesting doesn't get it done. I have to take action. And I'm curious, when you were talking about you were getting lost in the Kristin, now I can't remember exactly how you said it, but the not corporate Kristin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the not corporate Kristin can't have a successful business unless there's some of that blend. So can you explain that a bit more for us?
Mm-hmm. So masculine, feminine energetics is a whole rabbit hole to get down. So we all carry masculine and feminine energy within us. It's not, I'm a woman, so I'm feminine, and Otis is a man and he's masculine, right? It's we carry both polarities within us. And so this happens also in relationships, right? Two partners are in a relationship, even same-sex partners. One carries more masculine and one carries more feminine. There has to be that polarity in order for the relationship to thrive. And so within us, the masculine is this structure. It's the safety. It's the foundation. It's the container. Feminine is more of the emotion, the change, a little more like chaotic and, creative energy is the feminine. And so what happens is we have to balance the two, right? So the masculine can basically create the container for the feminine's creative energy, right? So the feminine, informs the masculine. This is what I want to build, right? And then the masculine creates the container for that. When they're off balance, we end up in spaces like, the feminine, for example, getting lost in emotion and just needing to be emotional all the time instead of understanding that, like, emotion has a period of time that it's not helpful to just keep running through it. Right. And then the masculine, if the masculine gets lost in that achieving, that hustle energy, right? The hustling for happiness energy, I like to say, it becomes this more of a proving, right? I'm trying to prove based on my achievements. When they're balanced, you create this harmony between the two where you can have this very grounded energy that can withstand, this tornado feminine that's running around and really help hone its energy into, this is a good path for this, right? Okay, this is the creative and this is how we create that. So it's an interesting journey between the two. I've been all in my masculine and then all in my feminine, and now I'm in that space of learning to balance between the two.
Are you so much trying to think of the right word here, intentional to where you can say, whoa, hey there, feminine Kristin, this ain't the time. Are you that kind of, is it really that kind of literal, or is it more, I don't know, unliteral?
Yeah. No, it's not. It's very natural. It's a very natural flow between the two. What I would say is if I'm like I have structures in place that I've created in my business that work for me. And structure, again, is one of those things that's relative to people. You have to find a structure that works for you. Otis, you mentioned Monday, Wednesday, Friday is these muscle groups, and Tuesday, Thursday is another muscle group, right? For me, it's, something like, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I have my client sessions, and Friday and Saturdays are adventure days for me. And Sunday is my organize and plan for the week. And Mondays are my like CEO day to get shit done. So it's really, how can you find this space to what does your structure look like? What is your masculine? And then what is your feminine? I notice, especially when I travel, when I uproot and travel and I get out of that routine, I lose the masculine. Then you just notice it's not like, oh, here's feminine Kristin taking over. It's not really like that. It's just something that, again, I think you have to just be aware of and notice that, if I'm being too rigid in my masculine, then I'm not allowing the creativity. I'm not allowing the wonder and the space to create new things. And if I'm lost in the feminine, then I'm not creating the foundation that I need in order to actually implement the things that I'm creating.
Could you talk some, again, going into the routine, I think the interesting piece of this is like the continuous reassessment and then the variations on the routine. I'd be interested if you could dive a bit into that, because I think that's one of the hard things is building up a system to a point where you're actually using it properly and then being able to honestly look at it and go, okay, is that really helping me that much or not? I've gone through this with my daily reviews and those kind of things. I've changed it a bunch. And part of the experiments was I stopped for like 2 months because I was like, I'm not sure if this is doing freaking anything for me anymore. And I just completely stopped doing daily reviews, and then a month or two went by and I was like, ooh, I feel extra spacey. Like, this is not working for me at all. So could you talk some about what that assessment looks like and how you can, make those kind of pivots?
I mean, I think what you just described is pretty perfect, right? It's about experimenting and giving yourself space to experiment without making it mean anything. We really can't mess it up. We can't, it's just, we learn the way we're meant to learn. We spend as much time or waste as much time in whatever it is, the part of the journey, and then we contemplate it when we're meant to contemplate it. But I think what you said is perfect. We allow that experimentation, and it takes diligence to come back and check in on it. And I don't want to define like, okay, every Friday you should be checking in, right? Or every morning you should be doing this, because again, that structure, you have to find what works for you. So if your flow is every Sunday you sit and you reflect on your week and what went well and what do you want to shift moving into the next week, then you do that, right? If that looks like every morning you're looking back on the day before and deciding how you want to move forward intentionally with that day, then it looks like that. But I think the experimentation is really important, especially like bring another element in here, human design. I'm a 3 line, which is the experimenter. So experimenting is just a huge part of my design. And I made meaning of it for a long time. I made it mean that people would think I don't know what I'm doing because I'm experimenting and I'm changing things all the time. But actually, it's the way that I learn. And I can experiment and use the way that I learn to shortcut people, to say here's I just did all the work and here's what I learned, so take it from my shortcuts and you don't have to put yourself through that. But also you can't tell another 3 that, because they have to experiment with it to learn for themselves.
One other thing came to mind with that, actually. This is a little bit off, but talking about the routine there and finding the routine that's right for you. And part of my thought process with that is, okay, then Kristin, I get the routine, and now my routine is perfect. And Monday I'm doing this, Tuesday, I get my structure. The thing that came to mind was something, and this is from cousin Conor McGregor. I remember hearing him say this once about his talk about fighting and luck and superstition around fighting. And he's like, well, as soon as you have a lucky pair of shorts, now is when you don't have those lucky pair of shorts, you are making yourself unlucky. There's this idea of, it's like by creating this perfect structure, you're almost setting yourself up to where as soon as that structure's gone, things fall apart. Could you talk a little bit about maybe preventing that, or just any of your thoughts on there? Because I think that's a tricky balance when it comes to building your routine.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind there is giving our power away. So now like my success and everything that I stand for is reliant on this system or structure that I've built to sit in. So if I don't allow the flow, if I don't allow life to be around me, without giving myself some grace of, well, I better put that structure in place. Like if I'm here and I, get uprooted and I'm in the emergency room tomorrow morning, I mean, I better have this structure here. Right. I think it just takes the grace and the diligence, like I said, to come back to it, right? Like if you're on a food plan that makes you feel good and you decide to go rogue one day, then it's not, you just come back and reset. But that it's not everything. Don't give your power away to the structure. And it's, as I'm answering your question, I mean, I think about, how I've done that, I mean, I've given my power away. There's so many things that we can give our power away to. And so what are those things that you're not letting that wiggle room. You're not allowing that space, the spaciousness of, like I said, life. You're not giving yourself that compassion and grace that sometimes we just need. If I need a rest day today, I'm going to rest, even though I had a whole list of things I wanted to do for my business today, but my body is asking for this. And it's one thing that took a long time for me to shift, was not doing the things that I felt like I have to, need to, should be doing, and really doing them from a space of, my energy wants to do this now. I'm aligned to do this now, without making it mean that I'm not being diligent or consistent enough in my business because I didn't do it on some kind of timeline that I had pre-planned.
I think that's great, because it really all circles back to the knowing who you are and having that comfort. Because if you're checking in, you're taking that time to check in, you're becoming more aware of yourself. I think that's a powerful thing to think about. Now you mentioned some of your routine, and so do you do daily, morning of, lunchtime, throughout the day, Sunday afternoon check-ins, or share how you're doing that so somebody might be able to model your routine in that?
So I have morning and nightly rituals that I do from an energetic standpoint. So more or less about me clearing my energy and unattaching from anything that I've connected into, so that I can be most closely in my energy that I can possibly be in. Those are my morning and nightly rituals. And then, as I mentioned, I like to check in, like when I'm doing podcast interviews and things that I'm regularly doing in my business, whether I'm having a business meeting, a podcast interview, a client session, an event, and I'm checking in with my energy in those times. And then I have a monthly ritual that I do when I'm checking in with alignment specifically, right? So what's working in my business, what's come to a point of completion, what do I want to build new, those sorts of things.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great, I think that'll help some people maybe develop their own process for doing it, because it's such an important thing, however you do it. And I tell you what, I don't know if I've learned it or if I just want to put it on a T-shirt, because hustling for happiness. I'm thinking there's a whole line. Remember wasn't there like a little stick guy that was like with the hair, 3 or 4 pieces of hair is happy or something like that?
Oh my gosh, what is that? That was like a huge brand for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Life is good. Life is good?
Life is good. That's it.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it. Well, screw life is good. I'm going to hustle for happiness. And we're going to start the whole Tribe and Purpose spinoff for that. So that's what I learned. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I was going to say, but hustle for happiness, that's burnout though. So we got to throw in, so it's like hustle healthily for happiness. So then, and we gave you more alliteration out of it. So there we go. No, for me, and actually, I'm glad I wrote down a second one because I was going to say purposeful burnout, which is just another way of saying the hustle for happiness. And Kristin, I like yours more than purposeful burnout anyway. But no, I think it's really interesting talking about structure and wanting that perfect structure. When I was talking about the example of it's like having the lucky underwear and those kind of things, is it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy is what I kind of realized as we were talking about that, Kristin, of it's like, well, if I need the perfect structure to be successful, then as soon as that puts a bunch of weight on me and all that kind of pressure, which is going to lead me to not taking action and all those kind of things. But then number two, then as soon as that structure falters, now I have something I can point at, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, look, I knew I just needed the perfect structure. That structure wasn't right, clearly, so that's all the thing was wrong. And you can kind of just set yourself up for failure over and over again, looking for that perfection rather than being flexible with it.
Kristin, how about you? What'd you learn?
Honestly, what came through biggest, a few things came through for me today, but biggest I would say is more grace. I think that, despite that I teach a lot of feminine intuitive work now, I'm designed very masculine. And so it's easy for me to be in that space and to give myself more grace when I just need a break, when I need the rest, and not let masculine Kristin take over. And I felt it last week on my birthday. I took off a week for my birthday and I was regularly like, I have things to do in my business. I'm not getting it done, And so, just allowing more enjoyment, because what else are we here for?
Yeah, that's great. Kristin, how do folks find you, learn more about what you got going on?
Yeah, so I would say my website is a great place to go. I have lots of things connected there through Instagram, YouTube, my podcast. So my website is kqunplugged.co.
That's great because I don't want folks to have to try to remember to spell Quattlebaum.
No, exactly. That's why I go with KQ.
Smart branding choice.
Good move on that. Kristin, it has been so great to have you here today, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this conversation and both of your questions.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Kristin Quattlebaum, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.